Imagine this. What if millions of citizens in the world's biggest democracy just disappeared from the voter lists? Well, that's not a hypothetical. It's a real story that has kicked off a massive legal battle, and we're going to get right into it.
So let's start with this number, 52 lakh and 30,000. That is how many voters in just one Indian state, Bihar, were declared untraceable by election officials. During a huge verification drive, they were just gone.
And of those 52 lakh people, this was the final count, 47 lakh. That's how many names were officially deleted from Bihar's voter roll. Now you can imagine, a move this big didn't go unnoticed. It set off major alarm bells and sparked a constitutional challenge that's now all the way up at India's Supreme Court.
So what's the one thing at the center of this whole storm? It all comes down to these three letters, S.I.R. And because this process is now set to roll out across the entire country, affecting hundreds of millions of people, you're going to want to understand exactly what S.I.R. is.
Okay, so let's break down what this thing actually is. To really get S.I.R., you first have to know how voter lists are usually updated.
Right, and this is the best way to think about it. The normal annual update, that's called a summary revision. It's kind of like a small software update for your phone. It adds some new folks, removes some others, but the basic list stays the same. S.I.R. though, oh no, that is a complete factory reset. You're wiping the whole thing and starting over.
And here's what that factory reset means in practice. The Election Commission of India, the ECI, basically says the old voter list is too broken to fix. So they send officers door to door to every single house to build a brand new voter roll completely from scratch.
Now, on paper, the goals sound pretty good, right? Two simple things. First, inclusion. Get every eligible citizen on the list. And second, exclusion. Get everyone who shouldn't be on the list, maybe they've moved or passed away, off of it. The goal is to get the most accurate, perfect list possible. But, as we saw in Bihar, the reality was way, way messier.
This timeline really shows you how it all went down. It started with those 5.2 million people being labeled untraceable. Then, people who had voted their whole lives were suddenly being asked for old-school documents, like birth certificates, and it caused total chaos. The result? When the first draft of the new list came out, a shocking 6.5 million names from the old list were just missing. That number finally settled at 4.7 million deleted.
Of course, this mess didn't just stay in Bihar. It went straight to the courts, setting up this incredible constitutional showdown. It's a classic battle. The raw power of the Election Commission versus decades of legal precedent that's supposed to protect your right to vote.
The legal fight really boils down to this simple conflict. On one side, you've got the Election Commission saying, hey, we have the authority to clean up the voter rolls. And on the other, you have petitioners saying, whoa, the way you're doing it violates our fundamental rights.
And the ECI has some serious legal muscle behind its argument. They point to Article 324 of the Constitution, which is basically their superpower. It gives them sweeping control over elections, and they also point to a specific law that says they can conduct a special revision in such manner as it may think fit. Their argument is pretty straightforward. The law says we can do this.
But then you have the counter-argument, and it hinges on this powerful quote. It's from a landmark 1995 Supreme Court case, and the principle it established is absolutely vital. If your name is already on the voter list, the system assumes you're a citizen. The responsibility isn't on you to prove you belong there, it's on the person who's trying to get your name taken off.
And that's the heart of the case against S.I.R. The petitioners argue that this process completely flips that burden of proof on its head. It forces millions of existing voters to prove all over again that they're citizens, which they say is a direct violation of that Supreme Court ruling. They're calling the process arbitrary and say it's just creating huge obstacles to the fundamental right to vote.
So, you've got these two massive legal arguments colliding. How did the Supreme Court handle it? Well, it did a very careful balancing act, and it came out with a really nuanced but super important interim decision.
First things first, and this is super important, the court did not stop S.I.R. in its tracks. It respected the Election Commission's authority and didn't shut the whole process down, which shows it's hesitant to get in the way of how elections are run.
But, and this is a really big but, it immediately stepped in to change how S.I.R. was being done. So while the factory reset was allowed to go on, the court basically installed some crucial guardrails to protect everyday citizens.
The court made two major changes. 1. Transparency. It ordered the ECI to publish the entire list of all those missing names so people could actually check for themselves and fight their removal. And 2. Practicality. It told the ECI to start accepting common documents that people actually have, like an Aadhaar card or a ration card, not just these old, hard-to-find papers.
And that brings us to why this isn't just a story about one state. You see, Bihar was just the beginning. It was the test case. The real story is what's happening right now as this whole thing goes national.
Take a look at this number, 510 million. That is the rough number of voters who are going to be affected by Phase 2 of S.I.R, which, by the way, is already happening.
Yeah, this next phase is rolling out across 12 other states and territories, and we're talking about some of the country's most populated states, like Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, and Tamil Nadu. So the stakes that we saw in that Bihar case, they're now being multiplied on a massive, massive scale. And here's the kicker you got to remember. Even though the process is moving forward with the court's new rules, that fundamental legal question, does the Election Commission actually have the power to make every single voter prove their citizenship from scratch, that's still unanswered. The final verdict on that is still pending with the Supreme Court.
So when you strip it all away, what you're left with is this classic democratic dilemma. It's a fight between two really important ideas, the desire for a perfectly pure and accurate voter list versus the absolute need to protect every citizen's right to vote without making it impossible for them.
And that really leaves us with the million-dollar question at the heart of this whole thing. In the search for a perfect system, how do you make sure you don't accidentally kick out the very citizens that system is supposed to serve? Is it possible for a democracy to have both perfect purity and total protection? Well, that's the big question the whole country is now waiting for the Supreme Court to answer.